Hello everyone and welcome back to Nerdy Nekoma. Today we start with the first TGCF aka Have an Official's Blessing fanfic on this channel. I'm super excited. I love TGCF, as most of you know. And so we could not start this in a normal way. No, we're gonna start with something very special, which has only been done once ever before on this channel. And that is we have a guest author on this channel. I approached them on AO3 because I love them and their work. They write my favorite TGCF fanfics ever. So yeah, this fanfic was written by Farael. I so hope I pronounced that correctly. I will leave obviously the link to the original work in the video description. Please check it out and please also check out their other work on TGCF fanfics. They are amazing. I love them so much. Let's get started. Let's go. The first thing Wu Ming heard upon regaining consciousness was the clashing of blades above him. There was a dazed, distorted feeling in his head, as though his memories were being filtered through badly blown glass, some patches too worn to be seen through at all. His head hurt too, and all of his limbs were heavy and unresponsive. His limbs. He still had limbs. That was a nice surprise. Wu Ming hadn't been sure what would be left of him after that pack of angry spirits was done with him, but he hadn't expected to still have limbs. Maybe he had reformed? Maybe that was the reason for the pain and stiffness and dizzy fog which clouded his head. His next thought was, of course, his highness. How long did it take for his body to reform? How long had he been absent from his god's side? It's not that he thought his god needed him or that he would have been missed. He was just a lowly, nameless ghost after all. But still, what if he could have helped his god in some way but he wasn't there? What if his god had left Yang'an and he couldn't find him? Above his head, the crash of blade on blade continued. Close. So close it was almost directly on top of him. Slowly, Wu Ming opened his eyes. At first, all he saw was the blurred motion of a pair of booted feet moving with the speed and skilled footwork that only the most expert swordsmen or dancers could ever dream of. He blinked a couple of times to clear his vision and looked up, and then the breath he didn't need caught in Wu Ming's throat, for he had found his god. Xie Lian stood above him, sword in one hand, dark hair flowing freely behind him with every strike. He was breathtaking. Beautiful. Still the most beautiful sight Wu Ming had ever seen. For a moment all the ghost could do was stare at the splendor of his god. And then reality crashed into sudden, sharp focus. His highness was fighting, and from his place on the ground Wu Ming couldn't tell exactly how many opponents he had, but there seemed to be at least a dozen of them. A dozen men with swords, who dared to attack his highness. Memory rose in Wu Ming of that horrible day on the auspicious land, when all those disgusting pigs who called themselves gods dared to take up weapons against the only real god in all the heavens. But Wu Ming could tell at a glance that these weren't gods, they were men, and this time Wu Ming had limbs too, and a sword. Wu Ming scrambled to his feet. His head still hurt and his limbs still felt stiff and heavy, but he could fight. If it was for his highness, even with 100 times the discomfort, he could fight. His highness must have heard the sound from behind him because his eyes flickered momentarily in Wu Ming's direction. The speed and precision of his blade never changing. You're awake! Wu Ming nodded and reached for the sword at his waist, beginning to draw it even as he lunged toward the nearest of his god's attackers, only to be brought up short as Xie Lian flung out an arm to block the ghost's path. "No, stay back." It was only a moment, only an instant of shifted attention, but in a fight against a dozen, even that was enough to allow one of the men inside His Highness' guard. The cut was not deep. It was barely anything, in fact. Only a graze along the line of one of the crown prince's perfectly sculpted cheeks, but at the sight of his god's blood, Wu Ming saw red. Heedless of everything, even his god's command, Wu Ming threw himself forward at the encircling men, an unstoppable tide of fury ready to crash over them and sweep them all away. "Rouillé!" The cry came from His Highness' mouth, and suddenly something twisted around Wu Ming and he crashed to the ground. He looked down shocked to see a band of white silk winding itself around him, pinning his arms, his legs, dragging him backward away from the fight. What was this? He was about to struggle when he heard his god speak again. "Please, wait there." That please froze Wu Ming more effectively than any physical restraint could have done. That his god should say please to him, that he should have been so remiss in obeying his god's command that he should have to say please at all. Now, struggling was the last thing he would dream of doing. He had already distracted his god once, and Xie Lian had been wounded because of it. It was already a sin. Already a transgression for which he would go down on his knees and beg his god's forgiveness, always knowing that he was beyond forgiveness. He would not distract his god again. Wu Ming lay like a statue, not twitching so much as a finger for fear of distracting Xie Lian. Only his eye moved, taking in the scene around him in more detail this time. His Highness was a blaze of elegance and power, displaying a level of skill he doubted any other martial god could dream to match. Even as Wu Ming watched, two of the men fell away from Xie Lian, stunned or unconscious. Yet, despite the abilities His Highness clearly displayed, Xie Lian's movements were oddly muted, as though he was confining himself to a few square feet and nothing more. Just then, one of the men cried out, "Give him to us!" Another joined in, and then another. "Why are you fighting us? Just hand him over! Shouldn't we be on the same side? You're a cultivator! Why are you protecting a demon?" His Highness was protecting someone? Wu Ming's eyes flickered around him, searching for whoever it was that might be worthy of His Highness' protection. At his back was the stony wall of a cave, but to his left and right he could see nobody. Only the men, and besides them, the only ones in the cave appeared to be His Highness and himself. Realization struck him with all the force of a blow. His Highness was fighting the way he was because he was keeping his body, his own precious body, between Wu Ming and all those swords. He was the one the men were after, not His Highness. He was the demon they were hunting, and his god was... Wu Ming had to bite down on his lips to keep from crying out, from struggling, from shouting to His Highness that he wasn't worth it, that it should be the other way around, that if he was somehow causing his god this much trouble, then His Highness should just hand him over. Yet, he couldn't cry out, couldn't risk distracting his god again. All he could do was watch in horror and aching helplessness as his god fought for him. He who was nothing more than a nameless ghost, a worthless soldier who could even protect his prince. Why was it like this? Why was it always like this? Above his head, two more men collapsed, and Wu Ming realized why the fight was taking so long. The wounds on the men were minor at best. They had collapsed, but they were not dead. Even as they ganged up on him, even as they came at him with swords, Xie Lian was fighting to incapacitate only, not to kill. Truly, his God was a merciful God. What school of cultivation did you train at? We'll report to your master. How can you side with a demon like that over your own kind? The men kept shouting at His Highness, demanding, questioning, threatening, and rage rose in waves higher and higher within Wu Ming, so that he had to bite his lip again to keep from shouting at them to know their place. Still, the men who Wu Ming realized must be cultivators kept up their demands until only one of them was left, the most powerful of them. Why? The cultivator shouted the question at Xie Lian even as their blades crossed, and only then did his God finally speak. Because you're wrong about him. Xie Lian said the words as though they were the truest thing in the world, and because it was his God speaking, Wu Ming listened, but he could not understand. These men were wrong about him? Wrong about what? About him being a demon? A monster? Someone not worthy of His Highness' protection? He knew all of those things to be true. Knew them right down to the core of his being, and the toes of his body long since burned to ash. The cultivator also seemed to want to object, but before he could, Xie Lian's pommel collided with the side of his head and he collapsed to the ground. Only then did Xie Lian still, body proud and steadfast, sword held low and ready at his side, and though he was now dressed in the plain white robes of a cultivator without jewelry to adorn him, Wu Ming thought that Xie Lian had never looked more like the all-powerful, flower-crowned martial god. Xie Lian extended his arm again, and the white band binding him, which must be Xie, unwound itself from around his body and leapt back to its place around His Highness' arm, even as Xie Lian sheathed his sword, turned toward Wu Ming, and to the ghost's utter shock, extended a hand to help him up. I'm sorry for that, but I couldn't explain just then, and I didn't want you to get hurt. His Highness looked down at Wu Ming with soft concern in his brown gold eyes. The ghost, who had been in the process of scrambling to his feet, froze. His God was apologizing to him? He had interfered in his God's fight, causing His Highness to be wounded. He had managed to be so weak and vulnerable that his God had needed to protect him. He was the useless servant who in a few short minutes had caused his God both trouble and pain, and his God was apologizing to him? Your Highness, slowly. Instead of taking the extended hand, Wu Ming sunk to both knees, about to bow his head and beg for forgiveness, when he saw something flash out of the corner of his eye. Instinct overtook all else, instinct to protect his prince. Wu Ming threw himself in front of Xie Lian, knocking his God sideways, and an instant later he felt pain explode through him. The force and shock of the blow sent Wu Ming stumbling backward, even as his eyes dropped to the knife buried in his chest. One of the cultivators must have regained consciousness already, or had only been stunned momentarily, and had seen this as an opportunity to strike. A cry of wordless fury left Xie Lian's throat, and then the cultivator was flying backward, his head cracking against the cave's far wall before he dropped to the ground in a lifeless heap. After all Xie Lian's care and hard work to keep these men alive, he had actually killed one of them. And it happened for Wu Ming. The ghost only had a moment to be dazed by the thought, and then his God was back by his side, reaching for him, his eyes wide and anxious. Son, Wu Ming, are you alright? And it's not... Nothing. He tried to say it's nothing. It should be nothing. He was a ghost after all. Yes, being wounded still hurt, but it couldn't do anything to him. Yet somehow the word got stuck in his throat, refusing to come all the way out, and the pain wasn't subsiding. It was growing, spreading its burning fingers throughout the ghost's body in a way it simply should not have been able to do. Wu Ming? His god sounded distraught now, desperate for Wu Ming to answer him. The ghost tried. He really tried. He wasn't sure what was upsetting his god so much, but Xie Lian shouldn't sound like that. Not ever. Yet the words wouldn't come, and his vision flickered, and his legs buckled, and he collapsed into the arms of his god. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I really hope you liked it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Now, a couple of things about this story. First of all, obviously I love it. That's why I asked that I can do it. And you should definitely check out the original. Again, there's a link in the description. Aside from that, keep in mind this is my first Heaven of Fisher's Blessing story. This is important for two reasons. I mean, obviously I didn't wrote this one, but I still have to find my voice for the characters. So that won't be perfect yet. Also, pronouncing the Chinese names, I hope I'm doing it right. Man, I have no guarantee. A special thanks, as always, goes out to my Nerd Neckos. You help this channel out so much, and if you also want to become a Nerd Necko, consider it maybe. I mean, the join button is under this video, and you get early access to videos like this. And here's more content. Check it out. Thank you so much. Again, check out the original. Link is in the description. Bye, and until the next time.
Step 4. Everybody just do your thing. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day.